This is the King Chasing Podcast, where we keep Christ at the center of athletics. Here's your host, Brandon Gilmore.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. I'm Brandon, and this is the King Chasing Podcast. As always, thanks for joining us, and please make sure to visit our website at thencccaa.org for more King Chasing content. Today's guest is Paul Hembekides, the ESPN content producer known as Hembo. The 2012 Cedarville University graduate was a baseball student athlete and played in 3 NCCAA World Series. Hembo first joined ESPN in 2014 and went on to become the on-air researcher for the Mike and Mike show hosted by Mike Greenberg and Mike Golic. Hembo helped launch Get Up, an ESPN morning show hosted by Greenberg, and has earned a reputation as a sports trivia guru. Thanks for listening today, and I hope you enjoy my conversation with Hembo. Well, hey, Hembo, welcome to King Chasing. We're super excited to have you on today with us. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. It is a pleasure to be with you. And I have done any number of podcasts and radio hits over the years. I don't know that I've ever been on one with as good a name as King Chasing. I was just thinking about that as you were bringing me in. It's like the best name of a podcast I've ever heard in my life. I wish I had thought of it, but you guys have staked your claim to it now. So it's good to be with you. It's good to be on.
Well, thank you for that. It's actually something that came out of COVID. When ring chasing essentially stopped, we kind of were like, well, what else, what are we doing? Well, we're king chasing. So now you're known as the sports trivia guru on ESPN. You try to stump the many personalities at the worldwide leader in sports. So if it's okay, I'd like to take a shot at stumping you on some NCCAA trivia.
Okay.
All right.
Hit me. I have to admit that I have not immersed myself in the NCCAA record and fact book lately.
Sure.
But I'm willing to take a guess. I'm not sure I'll know, but I'll be willing to guess.
This might be a softball coming out your way, so we'll see. All right. Now, what 3-time NCCAA baseball All-American won 2 Major League Baseball World Series titles along with a World Series MVP?
Okay, so I think I know the answer. I'm not sure that I know the answer. I want to say the player that I'm thinking of spent time in college at Olivet Nazarene and Dallas Baptist. I want to say the person that I'm thinking of played in the World Series for both the Tampa Bay Rays and the Chicago Cubs, would have won in 2016 with the Chicago Cubs. I believe the answer to your question is Ben Zobrist.
That is exactly right. Well done. Well done.
All right. I'm always the one, not true, but I am always the one that asks and never the one that has to guess.
Yeah.
And so on occasion when I get that opportunity, it's always fun. People often ask me to join their trivia team, and sometimes they're surprised that I actually don't do that great. And what I always say is it's my job to ask the questions, not to answer them.
Right.
But
yeah.
I got yours right, so I appreciate it very much.
I love it. Now, you played college baseball at Cedarville University, who made it to 3 NCCAA World Series during your time there. What are some of your favorite memories during those events?
Yeah, my time at Cedarville was obviously such that I'll remember and cherish it forever. And when I think back on my time in college, very few of the memories that I've taken from it have anything to do with anything that happened away from a baseball field. I think if you talk to most student athletes, no matter how good or bad they were, no matter how good or bad their teams were, that's probably the sentiment that you'll hear from a lot of people, because there's something about the relationships, the teamwork, the camaraderie. And in the case of our teams at Cedarville, we were also pretty good. There were a couple teams in particular that I remember as being perhaps even better than maybe we wound up finishing, but that's how athletes are supposed to think. Playing at the World Series in Cincinnati at Prasco was always the highlight of every season. Like, that was the thing that you strived for. That was the thing that you had on the chalkboard, on your bulletin board. Like, that was the destination, right? And that event was such that when you arrived, you genuinely felt like you had made it. And competing in that environment, in those beautiful facilities with the unbelievably organized tournament that you guys put together was always the highlight of the baseball calendar for us. Now, obviously, I would have loved to have won one. That didn't happen.
Yeah.
But the experience overall is such that I hope that any student that ever gets to play at Cedarville in the future, or any Christian college for that matter, at least has the chance once. Because amongst all the memories that I do have playing there, and even being a student athlete there in all capacities, I'm not sure there's anything that I'll look back on more fondly than those memories, even though Ben Heller, who wound up pitching for the Yankees and threw gas for Olivet Nazarene, wound up striking me out on a pitch 6 inches off the plate on the outside corner to end my college career,
Oh
which is
man.
something for which I will never forgive the umpire. And maybe that takes me down a notch
Oh
when it
man.
comes to my faith journey. But
Yeah.
I'm still recovering from that experience. I remember looking back on our SID after I finished what I knew would be my final at bat, and he was giving me one of these deals. He was like, "Yes, that was at least 6 inches off the plate." But when a kid's throwing 97 miles per hour and you can hardly see it, sometimes you just got to tip your cap.
Yeah. That's brutal. Now, how did attending Cedarville, which is a Christian institution, how did that help shape you and prepare you for the journey that you've been on since you graduated?
Yeah. So if you had asked me that same question 10 years ago, I think I would have offered you a very different answer. But now, with the benefit of hindsight, I can confidently say I don't like using the phrase the real world as much as people do, but in the absence of a better phrase, it definitely did equip me, and it equipped me in ways that I probably didn't know were happening at the time. What I've learned is the older I've gotten, the more and more I harken back to the things I were taught and strongly believed in growing up, and that was a very foundational element. Like the older and older you get, the harder and harder it is to kind of change your ethos as a human being. But the experience at Cedarville, whether it be the environment you're in, the obligations that you're responsible for, just the general like sense of community on campus, and the people obviously that fill the place, went a long way for me. It's not just in terms of the relationships that helped me start the career that I'm on now, or the people that helped me along my faith journey, or the people that helped me maximize my baseball career, or any such thing. The combination of all of those things went a much longer way than I would have guessed or realized at the time. And I think the further and further I get removed from those times and those experiences, the more and more I will grow to appreciate the foundational elements of my life, of which my 4 years in college is obviously at the very top of that list.
Now, you started working at ESPN in 2014. Can you share how you landed that job and then also became the on-air researcher for Mike and Mike?
So I landed the job by chance, like most people land jobs. I ran into a recruiter from the ESPN's Stats and Information Group on campus at LaSalle University one day, where I was doing a grad assistantship in their sports information office. I wanted to be an SID, and if it weren't for me running into that man by chance, I probably would be right now. And it was it was an opportunity that I felt like this is one that I shouldn't let go, and so I just aggravated him every few weeks by email until he sent me a job link that I applied for. And like you might imagine, I grew up just inhaling every piece of sports content that I possibly could. And so I was the kind of person that would be suited for an entry level research job at ESPN. And when you get hired for such a thing, there's onboarding, and they usually stick you on sports centers or a variety of shows to sort of figure out what lane you're going to wind up in. My introduction to Mike and Mike is not a romantic one. I happened to look at my January schedule. I think it was been January 2015, and I just happened to see that I was randomly assigned a couple of Mike and Mikes totally out of the blue. Now, I had obviously grown up listening to those guys. I mean, they were legends at that point, radio Hall of Famers already.
Yep.
And what I wanted to do was just make sure that I put my best foot forward. I had no idea if I would ever do another show with them the rest of my time there, but I had two on my schedule, so I decided I was going to try and do it well. And I guess I did, because when their researcher left, the combination of me doing well enough on the days in which I filled in, combined with the fact that no one else wanted to show up at ESPN at 3 o'clock in the morning to start that shift, equaled the job was mine. And my relationship with Mike Greenberg stems back all the way till then, and I have been I've attached my car to his wagon, so to speak, ever since, and I think that's been a good thing for both of us, but selfishly, especially me.
Yeah, that's really cool. Was there a moment during your first few days on the job when you had to pinch yourself, just being around the personalities at ESPN, along with high-profile athletes?
Yeah, I mean that's an experience that every ESPN employee, at least those that work in production, probably have. These are people that you have grown up watching and idolizing in some cases, and now not only are you in the same room as them, not only are you in the same office as them, but you're supplying them information, right? So I remember there was a time fairly early on in my ESPN career when Like I think it was a Saturday or Sunday morning, and we were doing like a Ryder Cup update on SportsCenter. And I don't honestly know the first thing about the Ryder Cup. I was just trying to make it up as I went. And like haphazardly, I threw together a graphic with 15 seconds of copy for Hannah Storm to read. I run it out to her. 30 seconds later, she's regurgitating. Who knows if it was even right? Whatever I'd written on that piece of paper. And like, this is Hannah Storm, who I've watched on TV since I was 5 years old. I mean, she's an absolute legend in this industry. And I just leaned back in my chair and thought to myself, like, I just did that. And if it weren't for me, that wouldn't have happened. So that was one, for whatever reason, early on in my time that I remember. The second of which, and this is a Mike and Mike recollection, one of those 2 days that I started working with those guys, just again, by chance at random, I remember Greeny giving me an on-air shout out with some note about, I think, Ohio State football, because that was the day, it was the day before it was the day of and the day after the national championship, the first college football playoff. And I remember him giving me an on-air shout out about some note that I had sent during the show that he especially liked. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I mean, I've been listening to this guy going since I've been, 10 years old, going to school. Like, that's pretty cool. And this is something that I could get used to. So little things like that really add up when you're just starting somewhere and go a long way in kind of affirming the work that you're doing.
What's the story of how you became known as the sports trivia guru on ESPN?
So like anything else, those things come very slowly and steadily. So back on Mike and Mike, you might recall, in case you were a listener, that I would very often send information to them throughout the show, sometimes in the form of a trivia question, sometimes in the form of a list or something to that effect, where Greeny would look to turn it into a trivia question. And what he would often do is hit his da-da-da sounder on his radio board and say, oh, we got a fun one from Hembo here. He would read it, Golic would ponder it during the break, and we'd come back after the break and we would deliver the right answer. And it was just a fun way to, tease content from one segment to the next, get a cool research note into the show in a creative way, whatever. I didn't ever think too much of it, but Greeny especially liked it. When we launched Get Up, I convinced Greeny into making the trivia element a larger part of that show. And the show used to be 3 hours long, and I used to try and have like one kind of trivia element in each hour. What it has eventually become is one trivia question per show, and we've reached a point where I select the analyst, the talent that day that's taking a guess at it. I have formed very long-standing rivalries at this point with Dan Graziano and my nemesis Rex Ryan, and it has sort of taken on a life of its own. And because I've been on Get Up since literally the day that it launched, it has, I guess, in some sense become like a destination for some people who come on the show and want to take a shot at me, or who come on the show and definitely don't. But either way, it's nice to sort of own this space that people have become so fond of. And it's also great practice for me to have learned how to conceive a trivia question, in some cases sort of on the fly, and adds value to our show in a very unique way. And the personality play is really what makes it different. It's one thing to consume a piece of information on a graphic or to get it on your phone. But if you're watching TV or you're watching the show on your phone and you see the kind of the emotion that goes along with the pride or the pain in getting right or wrong the trivia question, it adds a lot of layer to our show, and I'm really proud of what we have created as a result.
Yeah, in preparation for this interview, I came across a clip of you. I think the trivia question was related to what the single game scoring record in the NBA Finals was, and I think Dan Graziano got it right with Elgin Baylor, and you were completely shocked. And
I was shaken because Dan Graziano is a football expert, and that was I think a show during June in which I decided this is what I can definitely pull on him. And Elgin Baylor is an obscure answer to that question,
right?
But generally speaking, just as an aside, if you're ever asked a question about Lakers scoring anything, it's usually Jerry West or Elgin Baylor, and not Kobe Bryant or or Shaq or anyone that's more contemporary. Those guys average like 30 points every single year for the longest time.
Yeah, that's crazy. What are some ways that you try to stay grounded in your faith and keep Christ the priority in your life?
So obviously that's the most important question that you've asked me so far. And because this is a conversation about my career and my time at ESPN, I'd like to answer it through that prism, because every person who shares our faith, especially those in the public eye, really in any way, I think feels various degrees of responsibility or obligation to shine. Like, we're obviously called to be a light. And anyone individually can do that differently. So, for example, my colleague Dan Orlovsky, who is a very outspoken, public, forward-facing Christian, shares things on his Twitter account and will on occasion sprinkle things into shows that make that obvious, and is almost as well known for not swearing as he is anything else. Like these are his things, but he obviously has a larger platform than I do. My old buddy Jason Romano, who works at Sports Spectrum, was a light at ESPN for any number of years, and has since taken his platform there and turned his whole career into a sports faith hybrid, which has been a wonderful opportunity for him. My opinion is that the very best way that you can showcase your faith, or at least for me personally, the best way that I can showcase my faith is to do my job excellently. It is my opinion that we can be Christ-like in the manner at which we do our jobs, in the manner at which we work, the quality at which we work, the effort with which we put in. Because that isn't to say that you can't work hard or be highly successful if you're not a follower of Christ, but it is to say that I do genuinely believe that the Lord takes pride in reflecting upon things that you do in your life aside from what happens on Sunday morning. And in my particular case, I strive to do my job as well as I possibly can every single day. And it is my opinion that like doing so with the kind of attitude, with the Christ-like attitude that I at least strive to carry with every day, is as good a testimony as personally one can have. Now, you asked that question to 10 different people. Some people might say, I want to be more forward-facing and not in your face, but more obvious that this is my faith journey, and every single day I want to make it clear that I'm a Christian. In my particular case, my answer to your question is I want to do my job more excellently than anyone else, and it is, if I can do that with a Christ-like attitude, I think I can prop him up in a way that very few else can.
Now, when Damar Hamlin got hurt this past NFL season, it opened the doors for faith to become more prevalent among athletes and national television. We even saw the likes of Dan Orlovsky, who you just mentioned, praying for him on NFL Live. Two questions with that. How difficult was it to cover sports those few days while the country kind of awaited word on Damar's health? And then could you see and feel God moving at ESPN?
Yes, I could. It was a bizarre. So I'll answer your first question first. Those few days were bizarre and unlike any I can ever remember, because it almost felt like you couldn't talk about anything else because of the sensitivity of the matter. So the idea of talking about whether or not they could make up the game, or the idea of talking about really anything else, felt so insensitive based upon the fact that a man's life was literally hanging in the balance. I thought we did a, generally speaking, responsible job of covering the story properly, and we did the best we possibly could in leveraging the information that we did have, but also allowing our athletes, Dan Orlovsky included, to speak with the emotion that every person was experiencing when they watched that happen live, of course. In relation to the faith aspect of things, it was a really illuminating time. Some people might not favor the idea of a person praying on TV. Some cynic might even say it's performative. Um, what I would say is that, knowing Dan as well as I do, there is nothing performative about it, obviously. And I thought it was an outstanding platform for him to demonstrate something that many people in this country probably have never seen before. And to see it on that stage in a moment that everyone had seen on TV, Damar Hamlin collapsing, and then to see Damar Hamlin obviously improve the way that he did and ultimately have turned this to be a good thing, as hard as it is to imagine saying so, was an incredible thing for our network and for Christianity as a whole. Like the sports faith intersection there was as strong and as powerful and as visceral as anything that I can ever remember. Like, we can't agree on anything in this country, but I don't know anybody who couldn't look at Dan praying in that moment, to have seen what happened on that field, and then to see what happened without having a true appreciation for the power of prayer and what faith can do. And so I guess that's the best way I can answer that question. It was obviously a powerful moment, and the experience itself, that what happened on that field, is something that none of us will ever forget that we saw. But like anything else we can do, we can use it for good. And the combination of, Dan and others who were able to put their faith on display, and then obviously subsequently what the NFL has been able to do in celebrating his recovery, has been just a wonderful triumph for the sport in so many ways.
Yeah, I think specifically what Dan did was inspiring to so many Christians who, saw him do that, took a chance, not just in front of his work peers, but in front of the entire country. And it gave everybody the idea that, hey, I can do that too at my job. Well, that's all the time we have, but is there anything else you'd like to mention before I let you go?
There is one thing actually. So on April 4th, there will be a book coming out. The book is called Got Your Number. The book is written by Mike Greenberg, my longtime partner, and I'm his co-host and research co-author and researcher for this book. In short, again, it's called Got Your Number. We have written 100 essays on 100 different athletes, coaches, teams, commentators, and we've decided who owns every number in sports, numbers 1 through 100. So we have decided every number in between, who owns the number, and then there's an explanation for why. So that's our book. We're really excited about it. It comes out April 4th, and you can find it anywhere you buy a book. It's called Got Your Number. And if 5 or 10 people that are listening to this right now buy it and enjoy it, it'll mean the world to us. Honestly, it's probably the project on which I've worked that I'm more proud of than any other in my career. So I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to plug it, and I hope that you enjoy reading next month.
Yeah, we'll look forward to that coming out. Well, thank you, Hembo. We've really enjoyed our time. I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us on King Chasing today.
Thanks, bud.
Thanks again to Hembo for sharing about his time as a baseball student athlete at Cedarville, his journey to ESPN, and how he stays grounded in his faith. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to the King Chasing podcast on whatever app you use to listen. We would also appreciate it if you encouraged others to listen and subscribe. Once again, we're thankful to you for tuning in and supporting us. Join us next time on King Chasing. Take care, everyone.